Federal laws and rights. Federal laws and rights. In this section, you'll learn about the most important laws impacting special education in the United States. IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. FERPA, Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. WIOA, Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act. But first, let's look at how federal laws and state policies impact what happens in local schools. Federal and state roles. Federal, state and local government entities work together to ensure that all children have access to a free appropriate education in the United States. Federal government role. Congress is responsible for creating, debating and passing laws that ensure that all children with developmental disabilities have the right to a free appropriate public education, FAPE, in the least restrictive environment, LRE. Setting minimum educational standards that all states must comply with. Authorizing federal funding for preschool through secondary education, including special education services for students with disabilities. The U.S. Department of Education is responsible for allocating federal funds and ensuring that states comply with federal laws. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is the primary law governing special education in the United States. State role. State legislatures or assemblies are responsible for making and amending state education laws, interpreting federal laws and ensuring that state policies comply with federal standards, protections and safeguards. States can create policies that go beyond minimum federal requirements, but they cannot provide less than federal standards. Determining what constitutes an appropriate education in their state, how the public education system is structured, how services are delivered, etc. Creating processes for evaluating children and determining if they are eligible for special education services. Allocating federal and state funds to local education authorities, or LEAs. State education departments are responsible for overseeing preschool through secondary education for students with disabilities. Under IDEA, some students who receive special education may be eligible for extended education through age 21 or 22. This allows local schools more time to help students prepare for adult life in their communities. Dig deeper. Article, Special Education, Federal Law versus State Law. Resource, Special Education Advocacy Library at Rights Law. Parent to Parent, Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates. Our stories. Local education agencies. Local school districts are responsible for providing educational services through local schools, including how, where and when special education services are provided. Because educational services are delivered locally, it is particularly important for parents to know the local educational agency, or LEA, that is responsible for special education services in their area. An LEA is a public board of education or other public authority that is legally constituted to administer, direct or perform public educational services for public elementary or secondary schools in a city, county, township or school district. In many cases, this is a local school board. LEAs provide free, appropriate special education services for all children in the district who are eligible for special education supports and services, including those who attend private schools or are being homeschooled. Complying with both federal and state laws and paying for special education services and supports that are authorized by federal and state laws. Making district-wide decisions and creating educational policies and procedures that affect all students, including children with developmental disabilities. Deciding how state funding and local tax revenues are used. Creating and implementing a thorough child find process to determine how many children with special learning needs live in the district. Creating a consistent, research-based evaluation process to determine who is eligible for special education supports and services. Conducting professional, thorough, timely evaluations. Working with parents and school staff to create and implement individualized education programs, IEPs, for eligible students. These IEPs must outline the child's specific needs and how and where special education services will be delivered to ensure the child is able to participate in a meaningful way. This may be referred to as a services plan if the child attends a charter or private school or is being homeschooled. Developing transportation plans for children who must travel to another site to receive services. The LEA also is required to pay these transportation costs, re-evaluating the student at least every 3 years. What an LEA cannot do. Cannot deny services to a child who is homeschooled or attends a private school if the child is determined to be eligible for services. Cannot require a child to transfer to a public school in order to receive special education and related services. cannot require you to pay additional costs for these services. To learn what you can do to change or improve the special education system in your area, check out Partners in Making Your Case. Basic Education Rights. Basic Education Rights. In this short video, Dan Stewart, Legal Director of the Minnesota Disability Law Center, explains the basic educational rights of children with disabilities that are protected under several special education laws. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, PL 08-446. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, PL 08-446. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is the primary law governing special education in the United States. It is usually referred to as IDEA. IDEA outlines the educational rights of all children with disabilities, guarantees that all eligible children with disabilities have access to a free appropriate public education throughout the United States. This is referred to as FERPA. Ensures special education and related services are available to eligible children, requires children to be educated in the least restrictive environment. In most cases, that means being educated in a general education classroom. IDEA is built on a set of core principles that regulate the way schools plan and deliver special education and related services. It also outlines the way children are evaluated to determine their eligibility for special education services. IDEA was enacted in the mid-1970s. Part C was added in 1986. It requires states to provide early intervention services for children with disabilities from birth through age 2. IDEA was substantially revised and reauthorized in 1997 and, again, in 2004. Many people refer to the most recent version of the law as IDEA 2004. Let's look more closely at the educational rights guaranteed under IDEA.
Have you ever had the experience of being the only person in a classroom who had trouble doing something or understanding a certain concept? How would you feel if every day in school you faced the same kind of difficulty, while everyone else seemed to find the work easier than you? What kind of support and teaching would you need to keep trying? The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, is a law that was passed to help and support students who face this situation every day. The current version of the law was passed in 2004, but it's based on a law that was first created in 1975, known as the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. It revolutionized the education of children with disabilities, which, in 2001, was more than 6 million children. The IDEA requires that public schools provide specialized services to all children with disabilities from birth to age 21, for the purpose of granting equal access to education. A specific part of the law mandates public schools to create an Individualized Education Program, or IEP, for each student who is found to have an eligible disability. An IEP is a document that is drawn up and agreed upon by teachers, parents, specialists, and, if possible, the student. The document describes the present achievement level of the student, then specifies goals for the school year, as well as any special support needed to achieve those goals. In other lessons, we'll discuss learning disabilities in more depth and how to use an IEP in the classroom. The focus of this lesson is the law itself. Let's visit Cornerstone Elementary to see an example of the IDEA in action. Meet Susie. Susie is a bright, energetic third grader who loves school. Susie has a hearing impairment. She's not deaf, but her hearing is poor enough that it affects her educational performance, as she has trouble hearing any of her teachers. Susie would qualify for special assistance under the IDEA. Her IEP would include information about her hearing impairment, such as the most recent hearing test results, and would also outline multiple goals and services agreed upon by her parents and teachers. Although Susie might meet with a specialist once or twice a week, most of her time would still be spent in the classroom with all of her fellow students. This is because another aspect of the IDEA is the requirement that a student with a disability be educated in the least restrictive environment possible, or LRE. In other words, A student like Susie who has a disability should have the opportunity to be educated with her non-disabled peers to the greatest extent possible. Susie should have the opportunity to interact with her peers and have the same access to educational experiences as everyone else. Susie may just need additional resources, such as visual aids, to optimize her learning. Individualized education programs and least restrictive environment are the two most well-known principles of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. However, there are four
Video, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Print this page. Have you completed this unit? Then mark the 6 rights under IDEA. IDEA outlines 6 key special education rights. Every child has the right to a free appropriate public education, FAPE. The key words are free and appropriate. The law establishes that parents cannot be required to pay for special education services. It also recognizes that what is appropriate will be different for every child. Under IDEA, an educational solution must reflect the child's unique situation, challenges and talents. Every child has the right to an appropriate evaluation. This ensures that the child is evaluated by trained professionals using unbiased, effective and non-discriminatory measurement tools and assessments that focus on identifying the child's strengths, challenges and unique needs. The results of an evaluation should be used to determine if a child has a disability and, if so, how special education services might be applied to support the child. IDEA identifies 13 disability categories that are eligible to receive special education services. Every child receiving specialized services has the right to an individualized education program, IEP, and access to appropriate special education services and supports. This provision requires parents, teachers and school staff and other professionals to create a unique detailed, written educational program for every child receiving special education services. An IEP follows a very specific format and must be updated annually. Every child has the right to be educated in the least restrictive environment, LRE. The LRE provision assumes that the most appropriate place for children with disabilities to learn is alongside their peers without disabilities. It also assumes that children with disabilities should only be removed from the regular classroom environment to receive special education services when it is absolutely necessary. Parents can challenge decisions made by the school system. This provision outlines options and procedures that parents and schools can use to resolve disagreements and hold each other accountable. These procedural safeguards protect the student's rights, ensure that parents receive regular updates and accurate information on the student's progress and emerging concerns, and can use a formal due process system to resolve disputes. Parents have the right to participate in any decisions related to the child's education. This provision allows parents to take an active role in decisions that impact the student's educational experiences and future. Students are encouraged to participate in the process as they mature. IDEA's 8 parts. IDEA's 8 parts. IDEA 2004 is broken into 8 parts, each devoted to a specific topic. Part A, General Purpose of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Definitions. Establishes the Office of Special Programs, OSEP. Part B, State Eligibility for Special Education Services. Free Appropriate Public Education, FAPE. Least Restrictive Environment, LRE. Services to children enrolled in private schools. Part C, Early Intervention Services. Local Educational Agency, LEA. Part D, Evaluations, Re-evaluations, Eligibility for Services, Individual Education Plans, IEPs, Placement. Part E, Procedural Safeguards, Due Process, Mediation, Transfer of Rights at Majority. Part F, Monitoring, Enforcement. Part G, Authorization. Use of Funds. Part H, Preschool Grants for Children with Disabilities. Educational plans under IDEA. A key provision of IDEA mandates that schools develop a unique individualized education program, IEP, for each child who is eligible to receive special education services. The term IEP can refer to any formal, written, individualized education program that complies with the requirements outlined in IDEA for a specific child who is eligible for services. It also refers to the most common type of plan, which is required for eligible students between the ages of 3 and 21 and follows a very specific format. IDEA outlines 3 specific types of IEPs: Individualized Family Services Plan, or IFSP, for infants and toddlers; Individualized Education Plan, or IEP, for children and youth ages 3 to 21; Individual Transition Plan, or ITP, for transition-age students. Let's look more closely at each. Demand the same personal connection for the IEP process that you had with the IFSP. Individualized Family Services Plan. An Individualized Family Services Plan, or IFSP, addresses the special education needs of infants through 2 years who have been evaluated and determined to be eligible for early intervention, services and supports. Early intervention is important because it can change a child's developmental path and improve future outcomes for a child who is not developing typically. An IFSP identifies and provides access to services and supports for infants and toddlers with developmental delays and disabilities, as well as their families. This holistic approach is designed to give family members the skills and information they need to practice specific therapies at home, better understand the child's unique challenges, and increase the child's future success. An IFSP may include speech therapy, physical therapy, sibling or family therapy, and other types of services. Services are primarily delivered in the family's home. A standalone document details specific services that the child and his or her family will receive, based on the needs identified through the evaluation. Outlines how, when and where these services will be accessed. Identifies specific outcomes families hope to achieve. Video. Individualized Education Program. An Individualized Education Program, or IEP, is the foundation of your child's educational experience. An IEP outlines the unique special education needs, specific curriculum modifications and related services, such as speech or physical therapy, that have been identified for an eligible student between the ages of 3 and 21. Unlike an IFSP, parent and family supports are not addressed. Parents play an important role in developing their child's IEP. Parents know their children better than anyone, and their insights help ensure that their child's IEP reflects his or her unique needs, abilities and talents, and ensures that your child is included in the general education classroom and school activities to the fullest extent possible. It is important to understand the elements of an IEP, your state's special education requirements and local school district regulations. Reflect the results of any evaluations. Include a discussion of the student's strengths and parent concerns. Address special factors such as learning style, behavioral concerns, discipline strategies, etc. Recommend accommodations and assistive technology. Individualized Transition Plan. An Individualized Transition Plan, or ITP, must be created for any student over transition age and must be updated annually. Each state sets the age when transition begins and ends, so it's important to check with your state's Department of Education. An ITP can be a standalone document or incorporated into the student's IEP. The goal of an ITP is to identify strategies and outcomes for adolescents with developmental disabilities to help ease the transition from high school to adult life in the community. It must reflect the student's dreams and vision for their future. An ITP addresses the adolescent's strengths, preferences and interests, employment goals, career interests and skill development needs, post-high school education plans or vocational education needs, future living arrangements and independent living skills, including self-advocacy skills, opportunities for community participation. Video, working on your child's IEP transition. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, PL 93-112. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, PL 93-112. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 is the first civil rights law for people with disabilities. It prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in any program receiving federal financial assistance, including schools who receive funds from the U.S. Department of Education. Section 504 of the Act guarantees that every child has the right to a free appropriate public education, FAPE, regardless of the nature or severity of the disability. Under Section 504, appropriate education means schools are required to provide supports, including physical accommodations and supports, technology and curriculum modifications, that allow a student with disabilities to learn more effectively in a general education setting. Section 504 has a broader definition of disability than IDEA. Section 504 defines a disability as something that substantially limits one or more basic life activities, including learning, reading, communicating and thinking. As a result, some children with disabilities who don't qualify for services and supports under IDEA may qualify for supports and accommodations under Section 504. Like IDEA, Section 504 requires school districts to identify and evaluate children who may have a disability. Schools are required to create a Section 504 plan for each eligible student. This plan focuses primarily on helping the student access the general education system and learn alongside his or her peers. Video: what are 504 plans? Section 504 plans. The goal of a Section 504 plan is to remove barriers to learning by ensuring that an eligible student has the supports he or she needs to be successful in a general education classroom. Many students who aren't eligible for special education services under IDEA are eligible for a Section 504 plan. Parents can request a Section 504 plan for their child. A Section 504 plan is usually a collaborative effort between the student's parent, general education teacher, administrators and other professionals. Unlike an IEP, there is no standardized template for creating a Section 504 plan. Like an IEP, students must be evaluated to determine if they are eligible for a Section 504 plan. Section 504 plans should be reviewed and updated annually. A Section 504 plan often includes accommodations related to changes in the environment, changes in instruction, and changes to the way curriculum is presented. Examples of accommodations that might be included in a Section 504 plan: extended testing time, taking tests in a separate, quiet environment, preferred seating so the child is closer to the teacher or away from ambient noise, use of assistive technology and visual aids, providing a curriculum outline to the student. Understood.org compares IEP and Section 504 plans and highlights key similarities and key differences. Dig deeper. Guide: what is a 504 plan? Guide: frequently asked questions about Section 504 in the education of children with disabilities. Individualized Plan for Employment. The 2019 amendments to the Rehabilitation Act require state vocational rehabilitation (VR) agencies to create an Individualized Plan for Employment, or EPA, for all transition-age students who are eligible for vocational rehabilitation services. This plan must be created before the student finishes high school. State VR agencies are legally required to work with schools to identify eligible students. An EPA is a personalized plan that focuses exclusively on employment. It outlines the student's vocational goals and identifies specific services that the state's VR agency will provide. As with IEPs and Section 504, these VR services are free. The EPA should be incorporated into the student's Individualized Transition Plan, ITP, outlines work goals, steps to be taken, recommended assessments and support services that will be needed, identifies who will provide the services and where they will be provided. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, also makes it easier for students with developmental disabilities to access employment and training services, in part by improving access to core state VR services. WIOA requires state VR agencies to allocate 15% of their service budget to provide pre-employment transition services, pre-ETS, to high school students with developmental disabilities in high schools, including developing customized employment strategies for students with significant developmental disabilities. Contact your state's VR services agency to learn more about creating an EPA and to learn more about pre-ETS options. Dig deeper. Guide: WIOA process for students with disabilities. Document: vocational rehab, what you need to know. Print. Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015, PL 11495. Law regulating public education in the United States. It replaces the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001. ESSA's primary goal is to ensure that all students in public schools receive a quality education, including the 1 in 5 students who have thinking and learning differences. Go to understood.org to learn more about ESSA's impacts on students with disabilities. Dig deeper. You can learn more about ESSA at understood.org, Rights Law, and the Center for Parent Information and Resources. Use a highlighter to mark important passages when you're reading a law, and don't expect to read the law just once. Read it, reread it, then read it again. Americans with Disabilities Act, PL 101-336. Americans with Disabilities Act, PL 101-336. The landmark Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, was passed in 1990 and amended in 2008 as the Americans with Disabilities Act Amendments Act, or EDA. The EDA prohibits discrimination based on a disability, clarifies the definition of disability, ensures equal opportunity for persons with disabilities in employment, expands access to extracurricular and social activities, ensures access to schools, public accommodations, commercial facilities and transportation. The EDA requires school facilities and technology to be accessible to children with disabilities. You can learn more about the EDA and how it impacts your child's education at understood.org. Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, PL 93-380. Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, PL 93-380. The Family Rights Education and Privacy Act, FERPA, is a federal law that protects the privacy of a student's educational records. This includes grades, disciplinary records, test results, assessments and IEPs. However, the school can share information with other school officials with a legitimate interest, a new school if your child transfers, and juvenile justice authorities. FERPA only applies to schools that receive certain types of federal funding. Private schools usually don't have to comply with FERPA. If your child attends a private school, be sure to ask about their privacy policies. FERPA also gives parents the right to review their children's education records, request that the school correct any records that parents believe are inaccurate, false or misleading. Go to understood.org to learn more about FERPA. Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, PL 113-128. Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, PL 113-128. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, is the primary workforce development law in the United States. This federal law provides employment training and support services to youth and adults at risk of unemployment, including people with disabilities, to help them find and maintain successful competitive employment in their communities. WIOA funds many programs focused on helping youth with disabilities in high school and young adulthood develop employment skills. For example, WIOA requires vocational rehabilitation, VR, agencies to provide pre-employment transition services, pre-ETS, for special education students in high schools, including developing employment options for students with significant developmental disabilities. The National PACER Center on Transition and Employment offers an overview of WIOA and how it relates to transition planning and employment of people with disabilities. Stay informed. Every time a law is applied, it is interpreted and decisions, right or wrong, are made based on that interpretation. It's important to stay informed about how these laws are being applied in your local area, as well as at the state and national levels. The Internet has many excellent resources on the laws that impact education of children with developmental disabilities. Some of the most comprehensive sites are the Center for Parent Information and Resources, ed.gov, ideapartnership.org, rightslaw.com, PACER Center, understood.org. Sign up for email alerts distributed by special education advocacy groups. Research the laws on the web and regularly check for updates. Join parent organizations related to your child's specific disability. Most organizations follow legal actions, legislative issues and how the law is being applied. Regularly attend local school board meetings, so you know what's being said about special education. If you know the laws, you'll be able to spot discrepancies and question the action before it moves on to a larger forum. Several years ago I got in the habit of putting every school board meeting on the family calendar and making a point of attending every one that I could. I wanted to make sure that special education issues were given equal time. This summer, I was asked to run for school board. I think I'm ready. Partners in Education Quiz 2. Well done, you have completed Module 2. In this section you learned about the key laws that protect your child's education and common educational plans. In the next module, you'll learn about the IEP process and your role in developing an effective IEP. But first, complete this quick quiz. Instructions. 1. Read each question. 2. Choose the correct answer.
Yeah, let's try this. This civil rights law ensures that all schools, educational facilities, and technology are accessible. Well, would that be the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act of 2004, the Federal Educational Rights Privacy Act, Americans with Disabilities Act, Every Student Succeeds Act, Section 504, or Workforce Innovation and Opportunity. This one is the Americans with Disabilities Act. This law governs all public education in the United States. All public education. We're going to have to go with, oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to go with the IDEA. Number 3, this law protects privacy of student education records and allows parents to access all personally identifiable information about their child that is collected, maintained, or used in their school district. This one I remember is the Federal Educational Rights and Privacy Act. This law governs special education in the United States. It ensures that all eligible students with disabilities receive special education and related services and protect 6 basic rights. Well, that's the IDEA. Must have got the other one wrong. Let's see here. This law requires state vocational rehabilitation agencies to provide pre-employment transition services to eligible students with developmental disabilities before they leave high school. Oh boy. That's going to be the WIOA, I think. The civil rights law prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities and guarantees every child's right to a free, appropriate public education, including any learning or classroom accommodations that might be required. That's a harder one because access would be the Americans with Disabilities Act, but the free appropriate education, I think of IDEA. Also the 504 plans. Oh my goodness. I'm going to get so many wrong on this one. This one was definitely harder. And let's see if we can fix this one. But this law governs all public education. All public education. Oh my goodness. I'm probably still going to get that wrong. But I'll go with ESSA. Boy, that was harder. Oh, got 5 out of 6. Let's hear about this.
Partners in Education Quiz 2. You have completed Quiz 2. You scored 5 points out of 6 points total. Your answers are shown below. 1. This civil rights law ensures that all schools, educational facilities and technology are accessible. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act of 2004, Federal Educational Rights and Privacy Act, Americans with Disabilities Act, Every Student Succeeds Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. The correct answer is the Americans with Disabilities Act. It is often referred to as the ADA. 2. This law governs all public education in the United States. The correct answer is the Every Student Succeeds Act. It may be referred to as ESSA. 3. This law protects the privacy of student education records and allows parents to access all personally identifiable information about their child that is collected, maintained or used by their school district. The correct answer is the Federal Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It is often referred to as FERPA. 4. This law governs special education in the United States, ensures that all eligible students with disabilities receive special education and related services and protects 6 basic educational rights for students with disabilities. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act of 2004. This law requires state vocational rehabilitation agencies to provide pre-employment transition services to eligible students with developmental disabilities before they leave high school. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act of 2004, Federal Educational Rights and Privacy Act, Americans with Disabilities Act, Every Student Succeeds Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. The correct answer is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. It is often referred to as WIOA. 6. This civil rights law prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities and guarantees every child's right to a free appropriate public education, including any learning or classroom accommodations that might be required. The correct answer is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. It is often referred to as Section 504.